are the personalities in it. It tends to be a school that collects personalities, I think, over the years. And in some cases, one could imagine there would be some of this, and I guess there is some of that. But there somehow in all of this congeniality quotient, or at least the plausible respect for the fact that the world might actually be different than you think it is, you know? And if you look at a radical perspective, whatever you think that means, part of it at least is to consider the possibility that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you might say something some other time. Easy to say, not practiced so often. So if you see that as a premise and you're listening to people, I can think of something that occurred relatively recently. Van Berkel came and gave a talk, and Frank showed up, and we got into a debate that went everywhere from Prozac and psychotherapy to various aspects of how you make work and so on. And so the students got to listen to these three jokers, I mean, including myself in this, talk about what it is or what it might be and why. And I think, but it's not a particularly big deal. But it's important that there, I think there's respect for people who have achieved in the profession, but it's not reverence. It's certainly not reverence. And there are some people who walked in there. I mean, when Eisenman got hammered a couple of times. I just saw him 2 days ago. I got to come back to get even. You know. So I think it's friendly, but it's not always
not harmonious necessarily.
But I think the discussion is constructive, and I think it's useful to the students, and it's useful to the community. I mean, it's an open community. I think this is an important aspect of SciArc too. I don't think, if we're doing it right, that anyone should look at SciArc and say, this belongs to SciArc, Sylvia can't come over, or something. You know, it doesn't. There are schools that work that way in a proprietary sense. And I actually remember when I started, and we made a gallery, which is now, there's a very nice book on it, but it's published in China. You might pick it up. But when we started, I think it was Nader and Monica, they were at the GFC at the time, and I wanted them to come in and do something in the summer. And I remember this because I had to go to Peter Rowe, who was the dean at the time, and say, Moss asked us to do something, can we go? You know? And he said...
Were they asking for physical approval or theoretical
they have
approval?
Contracts. Contracts are written that way. And if you teach here, we won't let you go there. I think years later they told me about that. And in that context, the relations are good and friendly and so on. SciArc is completely antithetical to that. If he wants to go teach at Yale, he should go teach at Yale. I think he just did. So, I mean, and because I think the discussion doesn't necessarily belong to anybody. It's not owned by anybody in particular. And I think people make a mistake if they think that's so. So I think it's the spirit of it is pretty ecumenical.
SciArc, well, it has a strong international presence, and people come from all over to be there, either as students or as faculty or as visitors. In Los Angeles, it's in downtown Los Angeles. Much is said about LA, the place it may or may not be, its scale, what happens here, the nature of the problems we have here, the things we have accomplished, and in many cases things we haven't accomplished here. Can you talk about SciArc's role in participating, if in fact it does participate in some of the problems that would be beyond its borders, but would be in Los Angeles as a region?
I think this is a new thing, and that's why I said initially that I think SciArc has not a single history, but a number of histories. Not to say different people speaking at the same time would have very, very different opinions. But I think when I started, one of the first things that I did, and I was nudged to do this, frankly, I can remember a time in my life, I guess it's a while ago, it doesn't seem that long, I'd walk down the street and Jan Perry would say, oh, there's moss across the street or something.
And why would she do that,
And
Eric?
maybe we made people nervous or something. I don't think that's entirely gone away, because I think the world of architecture looks at itself very differently. So that may be part of it. But I think the point is, in terms of your question about the engagement of the school in the political process, I mean, all of a sudden Antonio is hanging around, and Jan is hanging around, and Weezar is hanging around. There's a neighborhood organization called LARABA, which is an acronym for I don't know what, but it's the arts district, and so it has something to do with the arts district. And we just used to sit there in Starbucks and talk to these guys. And the relationship is wonderful. It's actually very strong, very congenial. And by the way, I don't know whether you know this, we just, working with that group, we just put up a Abias Woods installation, of which there aren't so many, and there's certainly not many on the streets, in a place called Bloom Square, which I guess nobody would mistake for Trafalgar Square or something. But it's a little area in the Arts District, and it's up now. We're going to open it up officially and do something or other. A number of people contributed to that. A guy who worked with Lev, his wife, Stephen Hull, and we're going to have a little show. We're going to have a discussion and so on and so on. But it's a great thing. It would never happen if SciArc weren't in a position inclined to, willing to, open to bringing the world in and sending SciArc out. So I think that's a new development and an important development. And my sense is that SciArc for quite a long time was a very introverted place. Very, I wouldn't say self-satisfied or narcissistic exactly, but it was about itself and a more private discussion and sort of the hell with everybody else. And this is not literally true for everybody and so on, but by and large, I think the school very much looked in on its world and so on and so on. There may have been a few people that shared the world, the AA or the Burlaga or the Angewandte, a few of those kinds of schools, maybe Yale at a certain point in time. But now I think SciArc is, I get a little bit nervous when I maybe seeing the world, it makes you a little bit nervous because that has implications too. But I do think that SciArc's sense of responsibility for its role in the city and the definition of the city, the discourse of what the city is or was or could have been or should be and so on, is very much part of the role. And I can remember actually the first lecture that we had that I staged, and damn near nobody showed up, which is odd because at SciArc, because whoever the hell shows up, they 500-600 people. So we had Conhow was running the planning, Jan Perry, Tom Gilmore, people like that to discuss in a more civic way, political way, social economic way, what the city might come to be. I think.
What was that like at SciArc? What was the reception?
I think it wasn't very good at the time. Actually, I think the interests were more, at this level, making things and shapes and all of that, and space and how and why, which is itself a challenge.
And do you see a shift from that?
I think there is a shift. I don't know that the latter has been given up, the latter being the shape, space, form, and whatever components coincide with that discussion. But I do think there's a much greater interest in the city and the discussion of the city. You mentioned that History Channel thing, which I think was was an important piece for a moment. I mean, that may have more to do with it. Los Angeles as an entity for planning is probably very different than Los Angeles as an entity for building individual buildings, for reasons that we could discuss. But I do think that the school has an area of concern and a feeling of responsibility, not only from students, not only from faculty, but from the vantage point of people who are running the school. It was, when I started, Ming Feng was there, Chris Genick was there, and we put the thing back together a bit. Chris is gone, Ming is still there, Hernan Diaz-Alonso, John Enright are there now. So it moves. But I think all of those people share an interest in cities and what cities might become. There's in particular an effort to link LA, and I think obvious reasons, logistical reasons, sociological reasons, with whatever you call it, Latin America. I mean, we have an event in San Juan, we have one in Bogota, we have one in Mexico City, and so on and so on. So there is an interest not only in this city, but in other cities, and working in other cities. And you know, there's something going on now in Barcelona we're doing, so.
Do you, or does the faculty ever segue, this is the maybe approximate term, but content or issues or problems that are going on within the Los Angeles region into programmatic material that becomes a subject for either classwork or design studios? Are there people who are out in the civic life that aren't architects per se that come for reviews or do some kinds of interface with the school? Is that an important thing or not so important?
I think it's essential, although I'm not sure that SciArc, this is a broad comment,